All right, so what we're going to talk about today is the untracked meal, a free meal, a cheat meal, which is what some people call it. I don't like to use that term, but we're going to talk about how you can enjoy food off plan and still keep your progress intact and moving forward. So, first off, an untracked meal isn't the same as an unplanned meal, right? Now, an untracked meal, a free meal that I like to call it, is something that we plan out during the week, right? Like it's something that you already kind of have on the calendar that you're going to do. Whereas like an untracked or like an unplanned meal essentially is like, hey, you get off of work, you've had a bad day. I deserve to go eat Mexican, right? Like, and you haven't prepared for that any at all. You haven't done anything with your diet previously in the day to help combat that. Essentially, you're just having an unplanned meal, and you're gonna uh, make progression a little bit harder to see that week. So an untracked meal, it has a purpose. You should be able to enjoy the food without weighing it, tracking it, to a degree, without guilt is the main thing, and without it actually wrecking your progress, throughout the week as well too. But it only works if it's planned out, and it's accounted for, not just randomly on a Tuesday afternoon. Let me go get a meal tonight because I'm hungry, I deserve it, whatever. The goal is to actually enjoy the meal, not just use this like as a reward or like compensation for restriction, right? That's just builds bad habits in the long run. It's built into the plan days ahead, not just spur of the moment. And how you handle it should be dependent on the goal that you have. And we'll dive into that here in a minute too. And then again, a cheat meal actually implies that you did something wrong. So that's why I like to use free meal, untracked meal. I think the wordage helps some people as well too. So very simple graphic here. If you have a planned untracked meal, right, obviously the weight is going to spike up. It's going to come right back down, right? We obviously planned for this, but if you've had just a free meal that's unplanned, right? The weight is probably going to continue to go up, up, and up. You're going to keep spilling over because it wasn't accounted for earlier in the day, earlier in the week, things of that nature too. So your body type that you have should dictate the approach that you use when you're having these untracked meals. So there is no single like set in stone rule for an untracked meal. I have my guidelines that I give to everybody, but everybody's is kind of different to a degree. What works for someone might necessarily not work for another person, right? So, for instance, if you're a hard gainer, right, you're somebody who naturally has a low appetite, it's hard for you to gain weight. You have essentially a history of having a slower metabolism, right? It's just hard for you to gain weight. A off planned, off track meal isn't going to hurt you too bad. Like I know earlier in my fitness journey, I could have 2 to 3 off track meals a week, and my weight really wouldn't budge at all. I was a hard gainer essentially. Now, if you're an easy gainer to where the weight climbs up fast, your appetite ramps up pretty quickly once your meal structure is gone, you should definitely have a plan, going into the restaurant, knowing what restaurant that you're going to, pretty much knowing what you're going to order, pretty much have the game plan set up and play before you even get there. And that's kind of my approach, with a lot of people. If you know that you're going to have your untracked meal, at this certain restaurant, go to their website, Google it, use Chat GBT, whatever, to help you figure out, hey, these are the roundabout macros for this meal, and then you can play around with your macros earlier in the day, to kind of make that fit if you're really wanting to make it as streamlined in your macros as possible. Now, obviously, this untracked meal should be untracked to a degree, right? Like I don't want you in there, bringing your scale out, and trying to weigh everything out individually, but you should have a pretty good indication of is this a 1,500 calorie meal, or is this a 4 or 5,000 calorie meal? So, having some structure to it is obviously very important as well too. So, again, what should you actually do to prepare yourself for this? So, number one is try to actually set a target, whether that's a calorie target, a protein target. for the entire meal. For instance, I typically tell people, if you're going to go out and have an untracked meal, try to get at least 30 to 50 grams of protein in that meal. Make sure that you drink plenty of water around the meal, both before and after. And if you do it before specifically, that's going to support that satiety. It's going to fill your stomach up, so you're not like very hungry at the meal. If you go into the meal hungry, then you're more likely to just overeat. Always get sauces on the side. If you noticed, if you've ever gotten a salad, it typically drench the entire thing in dressing. But if you get it on the side and you take your fork and you dip it into the dressing, you might use a quarter of that dressing, right? Whereas opposed to if you just poured the whole thing on there, and then you end up, making the bottom of the salad nasty because it's soggy with ranch or honey mustard or whatever, right? Always ask for the sauce on the side. And then if you absolutely need to, borrow from another day's calorie intake. So, let's just say if you guesstimated that this meal that you're going to eat is going to be, I don't know, let's just say 120% of what you would typically eat on a day-to-day basis, right? 100% is your normal baseline, but it's going to 120. You could borrow essentially 20% from the next day or the day before to kind of compensate that, to kind of keep you on an even playing field, right? And then again, kind of going back to the water load, equation as well too. Um, you really want to utilize this, like I said before, that you go into the meal, because if you go into the meal hungry, you're going to overeat. And this is kind of the same thing as far as if you restrict hard earlier in the day, it always backfired, because this is kind of the same thing for people who, they have a Thanksgiving dinner in the evening time, right? And they don't eat all day up until, Thanksgiving dinner with the family. They're going to save all their room for their grandma's macaroni and cheese, the turkey, the dressing, the cake, all that good stuff. Well, now you haven't eaten all day. You're going into this meal that's hyper palatable. The foods are very calorie dense, and you're going to eat until your stomach is swelled up, right? I mean, until your fingers get swollen. I've seen it happen. So restricting harder earlier in the day is not the right thing to do. Again, if you need to kind of borrow some calories earlier in the day, maybe eat, you know, let's just say, for instance, if you have, 200 grams of chicken, 400 grams of rice, 20 grams of almonds, maybe track that back a little bit, maybe do 250 rice, 10 grams of almonds, like give yourself a little bit of playroom by reducing some of your meals earlier in the day to kind of give you a bigger bolus of calories to use for that meal. And then again, if you wanted to get like very specific with it, you definitely could. Like for instance, yesterday, I didn't have an off plan untracked meal. I had a tracked meal, but it wasn't the same as my normal meal. Um, and I pretty much made the macros line up pretty doggone solid. And this morning I woke up the exact same weight as I did the day before. So I think I pretty much hit it on the head. But again, I didn't really restrict earlier in the day. I just kind of made it fit within the macros that I already had. And I started that first thing yesterday morning just to make sure that I would have room. I didn't get to 5 p.m. It's like, man, I want a free, untracked meal, whatever. And then, only had a little bit of calories, to play with. I had the entire day's worth when I started earlier in the morning. So, one good thing that you should always do, kind of going back to the last side, is make sure that you have plenty of protein in that actual meal itself too. If you think about it, always try to eat your protein first at the meal. Like if you have a hamburger and fries, right? Always try to eat the entirety of the burger first, and don't eat all of your fries first and then the burger. You're more likely to overeat at that point. If you eat your protein first, protein is the highest satiety food out there, so you're going to get fuller quicker off of eating your protein first. That's why that you'll fill up here essentially first. Whereas if you eat a bunch of carbs and fats, that's going to drive that hunger up, and you're going to eat a good bit more. So again, that could equate to a lot more calories if you kind of eat things in a backward sense, I guess is the best place to put it. And this is why that I'm against people using like free meals at places like Olive Garden, for example, right? If you go get the Cajun chicken pasta, sorry, the Cajun chicken pasta that I've gotten, before, it's like a bowl this big of pasta and like 2 ounces of chicken. Like it's a ton of carbs, a ton of fats, and just a touch of protein. Like it's not going to do you any favors there at all. So always try to make sure that you're getting a decent amount of protein in that meal. as well too. Now, as you do this, there should be some signs if it becomes a pattern and not a tool at this point, right? An untracked meal should be a tool that you use to kind of, I don't want to say like keep you going along, right? But we all get tired of the monotony of eating the exact same thing every single day to a degree, right? And having this untracked meal is definitely like a mental break. But if you're if it's Monday morning and you're eyeballing the burger and fries that you're going to have Saturday night, that's a problem, right? So if we look at like four main things, and if you have any more than two or more of these, then it's probably time to look at a different approach. So the day after the untracked meal, if the scale only goes up and it never comes back down, you probably overate at that point. Again, if you're eating at a deficit all week and just to afford that meal, right? So like if you're let's just make numbers easy. If your total calories across the entire week was 7,000 calories, right? It's 1,000 calories a day, right? If you were to go to eat, 500 calories a day for 6 days in a row, and then on day seven, you had the bolus of that other calorie amount to have this humongous meal, that's a problem. You should not be eating in a severe deficit all week to make up or to be able to have this untracked, unplanned meal. If that's the case, you're probably just flat out just overeating in a degree. If it's happening more than once a week, you're probably falling off plan a little more than you probably should. And then if it gets to the point to where you're dreading it instead of enjoying it, then at that point you don't actually have to have the untracked meal. Just skip it. There's weeks to where I don't have one at all, and that's fine. I just feel like I just don't need it, or the desire to have one just isn't there. Then there's no need to partake in it if you don't want it, essentially. So the biggest thing out of all this is just don't sporadically have these off plan meals throughout the week without having some kind of structure behind it first. Another kind of keynote to add to this, if your check-in is on a Wednesday, do not go do a free meal Tuesday night at 9 o'clock at night. It's for sure going to throw your check-in off the next morning. Now, granted, I understand it does happen, but again, this kind of goes back to making sure that you plan the meal accordingly, and it's not just something that's just thrown in at the last minute, essentially. So a little bit of structure with this untracked meal can actually help you enjoy the food without having all the guilt that typically goes along with having something like that. So, um, does anybody have anything they want to add to that? Any free meal tips, tricks, advice, anything on that at all?
Would you say that like on the free meal, that there's any advantage to like doing that on a training day versus non-training day, I guess? Or because I
Yeah.
know obviously like
So like if you have like a weak body part for sure, like I would probably
yeah,
have that afterwards. Like if I do have an untracked or like my once a weekly kind of untracked meal, I'm having it for me on my leg day, just because I know that my output during that leg session is a lot higher than it would be, let's say, a chest session, a tricep session, whatever. Like my body had to use a lot of fuel to get me through that session. So I'm probably having that free meal after the leg day, or if you
yeah,
have I probably wouldn't have it on a total rest day. I guess it would just depend on what the free meal actually is. That's kind of where
yeah,
that structure comes into play. But yeah, if it was me, I typically like to have mine on like on a
yeah,
training day that I want to see that body part grow. So,
got you.
anybody else have anything?
Rihanna's trying to dig her microphone out of her fanny pack.
She's got a microphone now.
Well, her phone.
I did it. Um, I was just gonna say something that's helped me is like if I do it on a Saturday, a day I know I'm gonna wake up later than I usually do, it kind of makes my window for my meals smaller. So if I am like kind of having like the smaller volume of meals like earlier in the day, I'm not reaching dinner time and being like, oh my gosh, I'm missing this huge chunk of calories
Yes.
and I'm like tired and hungry. Or like If it's like again a Saturday or something, and I would usually train earlier in the day. Sometimes I may train later in the day because then it'll ramp up my appetite like later in the day versus in the morning because I'm a morning training person. I'm like hungry all the way till like 2 p.m. and then it just kind of dies.
Yeah.
So that kind of helps.
Yeah.
Or the free meal for breakfast.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, essentially what you're doing is you're just cutting down your eating window, for the day by sleeping in some. So like you don't have to feel like you're stretching your meals so far in between, and you don't have to go into the free meal like starving, and the appetite is there, but you're not ravenous as well too. So.